Folks, welcome to another Bird of the Month. This is the November 2023 edition, and this month we're going to talk about birds related to the Thanksgiving holiday, right? Good. So we've all got our minds, at least I certainly do, and I think a lot of From the Woods Today listeners do, have our minds positioned toward Thanksgiving, which is right around the corner, right? And as we know, birds play a key role in our Thanksgiving dinners. One bird in particular you might be thinking of as playing a major role in Thanksgiving dinner. And we're going to talk about that species, don't you worry. But for today's bird of the month, I'd like to dive into where do some of these domesticated birds that may appear at our dinner table, where do they actually come from, and how do these birds differ from their wild counterparts? Right, we're going to first start with the wild turkey. Of course, everybody's favorite, Meleagris gallopavo. So the wild turkey, I've got a couple of images here. This is a female wild turkey, or two female wild turkeys in the upper right. An adult female wild turkey is called a hen, which we will discuss. And then this is a male down here. So this is a bird that's native to North America. We've all seen them probably around Kentucky. And these are flighted birds. We're going to discuss the domestic turkey soon, so that's an important contrast. The wild turkey is very adept at flying. These birds roost in trees, so they can escape predators quite handily. So we've talked about the hen here and the tom. A tom is a male, or at least a mature male. And the male has a bunch of distinctive plumage characteristics, or some of it's non-plumage, in fact. For instance, we've got this bright, colorful head, much more colorful than we saw in the hen. We've got a fleshy kind of knob here that kind of comes out and it dangles over the side of the bill. That's called the snood. And of course, the male has this almost like tuft of hair. Now, obviously, it's a feather, or it's a modified feather because birds don't have hair. But they have this kind of beard that sticks out. And these are all traits that female turkeys use to judge whether a male is a suitable mate. Males also have these spurs. It's very difficult to see in this image, but a little spur there. They can be an inch or more on the tarsus of the male, the scaly part of the leg. These are used to fight with other males for access to females. And of course, we think of the classic turkey doing a courtship display, which is where the male puffs out all of his feathers, opens up his fan tail, and struts around in a way to attract a female. So this is only done by males, and it's done as a means, mostly in the spring, to attract a mate. Now, of course, Meleagris gallopavo domesticus is our domestic turkey. Now, this bird, as you might expect, was domesticated from the wild turkey in central Mexico about 2,000 years ago. Now, domestic turkeys, unlike wild turkeys, generally cannot fly. Some young birds that are often called chicks, or more appropriately in the case of the turkey, a poult. Poults can fly for a while, but as they get older in domestic birds, they tend to fly less and less, and they're less able to do so. And a big part of this is because domestic turkeys have been bred to be huge. I mean, they're often double the weight of their wild counterparts, some birds being as much as 45 pounds, just massive birds. And that's even larger than our native swans generally are. Sort of semi-wild looking animal being more or less here, but that's what's happened. Easily the most famous and popular of our domesticated birds. We will discuss, however, it's not the first domesticated bird. The domesticated chicken has been turned into a wide variety of breeds. Just as a couple examples, this one here, where you can't even see its head and it's got sort of an afro, is called the silky, and there's different colors of silky. That's a white silky chicken. They're very bizarre, have black skin and black bones and have an extra toe. This is a Polish chicken here with this really big afro. This is a barred rock here. We've got looks like a frizzled cochin. You've got a wide variety of different breeds that are selected for different things, right? Some breeds of chicken are selected for their eggs. Others are selected for their meat, like the Cornish rock, which we usually get in the grocery store. Others still are bred for show or hobby, right? I mean, this Polish chicken here, I mean, it's going to lay eggs and things like that, but it's not particularly practical, and neither is the silky chicken, right? It's almost like the toy poodle of the chicken world, if you will. And it's just crazy again to think that this bird here came from the red jungle fowl, and it did. Okay, mallard, Anis platyrhynchos. So you may be wondering, well, what the heck, right? I don't eat mallards for Thanksgiving or at all, right? Unless you're a hunter, the idea of eating a mallard seems kind of weird. Well, as we will discuss, mallards are a domesticated bird. At least they have been domesticated. Now these are wild mallards shown here, and this is one of the most widespread, if not the most widespread duck species in the entire world. They're found across the entire northern hemisphere, and males and females. We've got a male here with this green head and chestnut breast and this white ring around the neck. And the female, shown here, totally different, right? They're very visually distinctive. We've got the female, which produces those very loud quacks, which is kind of contrary to what most birds do. In many cases, the male is the noisy one. Well, in ducks, the opposite is true. So when you go to the park and you hear ducks, mallards especially, quacking, and you hear that loud quack, 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 that's the female mallard producing that. The male isn't mute, but his quacks are very kind of quiet and sort of flat. Now, mallards are very cold-hardy birds, but they are very migratory as well, but they'll stay in areas as long as there's some open water and food available for them. And they're what we consider a dabbling duck. So they feed in the water by tipping their head and breast underwater and leaving their butt sticking up in the air while they forage on things under the water. But here we are, Anis platyrhynchos domesticus. And the reason why we're talking about the mallard is it is the father or mother of all domesticated ducks, with one exception that we'll talk about in a moment. So any domesticated duck virtually is a mallard. So these include these little tiny domesticated ducks called call ducks, and these large bodied things like Pekin ducks. And you commonly find these domesticated mallards released in local city parks. People get them for Easter, and when they get sick of them, they dump them off at the park. And they can kind of survive short term on their own, although it's generally not good to do that because they'll hybridize with wild ducks and things like that. But the point is, these domesticated ducks, which are commonly eaten by people, are all mallards, domesticated mallards. That is with one major exception, Muscovy ducks. So I have that in here as an honorable mention. So this is a wild type Muscovy duck, really wild looking. It's got these black and red warts all over its face, and some birds have almost like a mohawk. And this one down here is a domesticated one, which this happens to be all white except for the warty face. Some of them are mottled with white and black and green and all these kind of things. This is a bird originally from Latin America. They've been domesticated somewhat more recently, with the males being much larger than the females. It's very unusual. I mean, in waterfowl, it's typical for the male to be larger, and most birds for that matter. But in the case of the Muscovy duck, the male is huge, like double the size of the female. And as a consequence, males are frequently flightless, whereas females can fly with no problem. The males also tend to have more of that warty skin on the face, with the females having a lot less of that. And you can find pretty large feral populations of Muscovy duck in parts of Florida, for instance. Okay, the last bird we're going to talk about is the rock dove, Columba livia. So this is a dove. You can find it in Lexington and in all parts of eastern, well, pretty much the entire United States, but Kentucky for sure. Mostly in either urban areas or agricultural areas. Thinking of Lexington, of course, being here in Lexington, UK, we have pigeons all over the place, including here on campus. And it's a large-bodied dove, so we like to think of pigeons, the rock dove, as a kind of a rat with wings, as we often say, but it's a wild dove, right? So often called the rock pigeon, and the word pigeon and dove are generally synonyms. Dove being a smaller kind of dove and a pigeon being a larger kind of dove. But they're really interesting birds. So the rock dove is monogamous. So if you have a male and a female, they stay as a pair until one of them dies. And then the the remaining bird will take a new mate, but while they're together, they're pretty much monogamous. And they produce a nest with 2 squabs, which is the name for a baby pigeon, per nest, and they'll do multiple nests per year. So the male and female will fertilize a pair of eggs, they'll take turns incubating those eggs, and then when you've got 2 little squabs in the nest, the mom and dad will take care of them until the little squabs fledge. And then dad will assume care of those squabs, kind of raising them into mature juveniles, while mom starts the next clutch, and they'll produce several clutches per summer. They're in their native range of Europe, Africa, and Asia. They nest on cliff sides and are found in many very kind of dry places, but they're pretty adaptable. This is that wild form of the rock dove. So it's kind of this gray overall bird, and it's got this light gray, kind of blue-gray wing with 2 dark bars along the secondaries and coverts. And here's a bird in flight, which shows this dark band on the tail, very distinctive, and white rump, very distinctive pattern on the rock dove. Well, the rock dove, like so many of these other birds, and produced a wide variety of sort of phenotypes or visual appearances. And the rock dove, Columba livia domesticus, is the oldest domesticated bird species on Earth. They've been domesticated for more than 10,000 years. Excuse me, very interesting bird, strong homing instincts, which is one of the things that makes them valuable for carrying messages. And the way that works is let's say you're going off to war and you want to send messages back home. Well, you bring a bunch of pigeons from home with you to war. You have a big loft of pigeons that are all basically programmed to go home. That's all they want to do. You let them out of the cage, they fly home. Well, if you want to send a message back home, you tie a little note onto that pigeon's leg and release it, and it'll fly back. Now, getting a message from home to you is a little bit more tricky, but you can send messages back home because the pigeons have that homing instinct. As a result, many people also engage in pigeon racing, which is a pretty interesting sort of sport. They're also edible, which is probably what caused people to start domesticating them in the first place. And they have a reputation for being dirty. And maybe in some downtown places they can be, but in say, an agricultural setting, I've personally eaten pigeon meat, and it's quite good. I mean, if you've ever eaten mourning dove, a pigeon is very similar, but just significantly larger. And of course, you see feral pigeons nesting on buildings as cliffs for nest sites, right? So here's an example of a bunch of feral pigeons up on a telephone wire, right? You've seen these before. This is Columba livia domesticus that have been released and gone feral. And of course, you see white birds like this. And remember, the feral pigeon or a rock dove is a type of dove. So it's very common for white pigeons to be released at weddings as wedding doves. And if you're the person who's selling the newlywed couple the pigeons, or the doves, if you're going to phrase them as that, you're being pretty clever, because you're going to sell them the doves, they're going to release the doves for the wedding, and those doves are going to fly back to your house, back to the loft where they came from, and you can continue to sell them to the next person. Do it over and over and over again, because 9 times out of 10, wedding doves are actually white homing pigeons. Well, there's a little bit of information. There's a little bit of information about some of our domesticated birds that may feature at our Thanksgiving dinner. With that, we'll leave you off and look forward to next month's Bird of the Month, where we'll be discussing the 12 days of Christmas. In the meantime, happy Thanksgiving, whatever bird you're eating this year.